Hi, I'm Jon Ferguson, and this is my brother Dave, and we're in the Edgewater community on the north side of Chicago. And Rich and Dori Gorman have been the campus pastors here in Edgewater for a little bit over 2 years now. And they have just done an incredible job of getting to know the people and the places in this amazing community. We're actually standing outside of Swift Elementary School, where our Edgewater campus not only celebrates every weekend, but also partners throughout the course of the week to help make this community all that God dreamed it could be.
You know, John, whenever I'm kind of in a school setting like this, a lot of times I remember a story about a professor, a local college professor named Cliff Schimmels. Cliff was a guy who loved being a college prof, but his real mission was to teach teachers to be the best they could be so that students like here at Swift could get the best possible education. I mean, that was his passion and that was his mission, to kind of reach students. In fact, he was so passionate about it, at the age of 40, he re-enrolled in high school. He wrote a book about it called I Was a High School Drop-In. He talked about how rigorous it was and how it almost, he almost didn't make it through, and he bragged about his B average. But if there was one word that I could use to describe Professor Schimmels, I think it's the word missionary. He was someone who was just passionate about reaching students and helping other people reach students. In fact, so passionate about it that he actually became one of them. We're in the middle of a series titled Identity Theft, and it's all about understanding who we are as followers of Christ and not letting anything steal that identity. Being a missionary is a core part of our identity as a Christ follower. Now, in the very first page of the first book of the Bible, God gave Abraham all of our mission, and it's this. He said, I'm going to bless you, and you're going to be a blessing, and then all the people on the earth are going to be blessed through you. God was saying, as my blessed people, you're going to be missionaries, and wherever you go, your mission is to bless the people and the places around you. Now, since the Bible is so clear that our mission is to change the world through this blessing strategy, we took that very, very seriously. In fact, so seriously, we started asking, well, like exactly how do we bless the world around us? Practically speaking, how do you live that out every day? And with that in mind, we began to look closer at the life of Jesus, and we started noticing there's 5 consistent practices that he did over and over again that changed the people and the world around him. And then to make it easy for us to remember those 5 practices, we put them into an acronym, BLESS. And we believe this BLESS strategy is so important and so core to the mission that John and I, we want to take this weekend and in one crystal clear message, make sure all 12 community locations and the thousands of people who make up community, that we all get it and that we're all doing it.
Now, if you know these at your community location, go ahead and just say them out loud. B stands for, that's right, begin with prayer. That is the very first thing Jesus did when he began his earthly ministry. He went away for 40 days and 40 nights to pray. He wanted to talk to the Father, and he wanted to hear from the Father. And if we're going to bring God's love to those around us, if we're going to bring transformation to our communities, we must begin with prayer.
And then the L stands for listen. I find it so interesting that Jesus, who is God, one time met a paralyzed man, and he doesn't just heal him or tell him he's going to fix him up. Jesus asks a question. He says, "What would you like me to do?" And then he listens. This is important. Before we assume what people or a community needs, we should do what Jesus did. L, listen.
And the E stands for, that's right, eat. We love this one. And so did Jesus. He was constantly eating with people, whether it was a cookout on the beach with his disciples after his resurrection or inviting himself over to Zacchaeus' house for lunch. If we want to get to know someone, the best way is to eat with them, just like Jesus.
And the first S stands for serve. Once we prayed for someone, listened to them, shared a meal, or even a cup of coffee with them, we'll start to become friends with them. And once we're friends, we'll be able to love them the way they want to be loved. We'll be able to serve them the way they want to be served. Jesus was brilliant at this. Whether it was compassion or miracles or words of wisdom, Jesus served.
And the last S stands for, that's right, story. You see, it's after we pray, listen, eat together, and serve others that we may earn the right to tell our story of how we found our way back to God. Now, my experience has been you won't have to tell them. They will ask you to tell your story.
So there you have it, BLESS. Now here's the good news. Many of you get it, and hundreds of you are doing this. And it's changing people, and it has the potential to change communities. In fact, this simple BLESS strategy is now being used by other churches in Chicago, across the country, and even around the world.
In the last year, since Community initiated the Bless strategy, the word has spread like wildfire. In 2012, Dave Ferguson spoke on the topic at the Verge Conference in Austin, Texas. The video from that talk has been seen over 2,500 times on YouTube and has been used as the teaching content for several churches looking to implement the Bless strategy. Oak Hills Church in San Antonio, pastored by Randy Frazee and Max Lucado, has implemented the Bless strategy wholesale, as have Westbrook Church in Bolingbrook, Illinois, West Ridge Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and City Street Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Internationally, Mirror Alliance Church in Alberta, Canada, has implemented Bless, and Tunbridge Baptist in Kent, England even did a spin-off of our Bless in a Minute or Less video when introducing the strategy for their attenders.
Once upon a time, good night moon, the end. Done.
Humpty Dumpty sat in a wall, Humpty Dumpty didn't quite make it. The end.
But probably the most fascinating use of Bless comes from our friends at Emmanuel Church in Malmö, Sweden, who have taken the Bless acronym and translated it to become a new acronym, Livet, which in Swedish means life. God is using the Bless strategy to bring life to more and more people, blessing them across the country and across the world.
I love seeing how God's at work using his blessing strategy to accomplish his mission. Now, I want it to sink in. So what I'm going to do is I want to tell you a couple blessed stories. One story goes all the way back to the first pages of the Bible in Genesis, where the mission was started. And the other one, it actually happened right here in this community. How many of you remember the series of children's books called Choose Your Own Adventure books? At your location, if you remember those, just go ahead and raise your hand so everybody else can see. Now, these books here, these were very popular when I was a kid. In fact, they sold more than 250 million copies. And here's how Choose Your Own Adventure books work. You'd read the book, and you'd come to a point where you get to choose what happens next. So you turn to like page 62, and the plot would go in one direction. Or you turn over to page 81, and it would go a completely different way. And in fact, this one, I think, has 28 different endings. And you get to determine the course of the main character, the hero. And as the reader, you get to determine and choose your ending, choose your own adventure. 250 million copies. Pretty popular series for children. Now, I think there's a reason these were a children's series. It's because as adults, we know this isn't how life works. Oftentimes, we don't get to choose our own adventure. I mean, the concept's appealing, and as kids, we might believe that really it's all in my control, and I can be whatever I want to be, and life can go whatever direction I want it to go. But as adults, we know that in large part, that's not how it works. I mean, if it did, I'd be in the National Basketball Association, even though I'm only 5'11", and have no vertical leap. See, life is not necessarily a choose your own adventure. In fact, sometimes, and some of you know this all too well, we end up in painful family situations with deep relational disappointments. I mean, things we never, ever would have picked. Sometimes we end up with jobs that they weren't our first choice. They definitely weren't our second choice. They weren't our third choice. I mean, they just pay the bills. And the way life works, we sometimes end up on the bad end of other people's unwise choices, immoral choices, evil even choices. And we suffer the consequences unjustly. Well, that was not only true for many of us, but it was also true for a guy named Joseph. If you've been with us the last couple of weeks, we've been following the remarkable life of Joseph. I mean, his life was definitely an adventure, but he did not get to choose where that adventure would take him. In fact, Joseph, if you're familiar with his life, he never ever would have been chosen to be sold into slavery by his own family, his very brothers. But that's what happened. Joseph never would have chosen to be falsely accused by his boss, his wife, of coming on to her and having an affair. But that's what went down. And Joseph, he never would have chosen to be unjustly thrown into prison for having done nothing wrong. He was completely innocent. But that's exactly what happened. And see, the one thing, and I want you to get this, the one thing that sustained Joseph, no matter where life took him, was this understanding of who he was and why he is here. He understood his identity, who he was. He was a missionary sent by God. And why he was here. He was there to bless people and the places around him. Here's the big idea, and I want you to remember this. In a phrase, if you have a why to live, you can bear almost anyhow. Let me say that again. If you have a why to live, you can bear almost any how. And this simply means if you have a why, if you have a reason for living, no matter how difficult or how disappointing life gets, you're going to be able to bear it. You're going to get through it. You're going to be okay. I'm going to put that. It's right there on your screen. I want to sink in. All of you just to say that with me. Okay, let's all say it together on the count of 3. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. If you have a why to live, you can bear almost any how. See, Joseph was the great-grandson of Abraham, to whom God had given this clear mission. Joseph knew by heart the words that God had spoken to his great-grandfather in Genesis chapter 12, right there in verses 1 and 2. He said, I'm going to bless you, you're going to be a blessing, and then all the people of the earth are going to be blessed through you. He knew that. So, no matter what the circumstances, no matter where God sent Joseph, wherever he ended up, his mission was this, to be a blessing to those around him. He knew crystal clear why he was here. And I want you to listen to something. This is fascinating. Listen to Joseph's time as a slave to Potiphar. Here's how it describes that experience. It says, from the time that Joseph was put in Potiphar's house, the Lord blessed the household. And again it says, the blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. Why was he blessed? Because Joseph was living out his God-given mission to be a blessing. In fact, you can skip to the end of the chapter and in verse 39 also, and it says the same thing about his time as in prison. And in prison really it was like being in a dungeon. And it says during that time there, the other inmates, the warden, the entire prison was blessed by Joseph. Why? Because he knew his identity. Even in prison, he knew he was to be a blessing. Well, check this out. Here's what happens. I want to pause here for a little bit. Here's what happens while Joseph is in prison. While he's in there, a couple of the inmates have these pretty wild dreams. And with God's help, Joseph is able to interpret those dreams so these two guys know exactly how to respond. Well, in those days, that was clearly a blessing from God. Well, as God would have it, fast forward years later, those same cellmates, they end up on the executive cabinet of the Pharaoh of Egypt. So then the Pharaoh has a dream about a great natural disaster, and he doesn't know how to make sense of it. And it just kind of haunts him. He doesn't know what to do next. Well, these two ex-cons tell Pharaoh, hey, we know the guy you need to talk to. He's in your prison, Joseph. And Joseph again receives guidance straight from God. And blessing almost undersells the impact that Joseph is able to make. What God did is God told Joseph what the dream meant and instructed him to tell Pharaoh that Egypt's going to go through 7 years of great abundance and then 7 years of brutal famine. During the 7 years of abundance, they should store up for themselves enough for those 7 years of serious famine. The Pharaoh takes all this in, and he recognizes the blessing of Joseph's amazing wisdom. He not only believes him, but he appoints Joseph as second, the number 2 guy, under only him over all of Egypt. So the 7 years of abundance come, just like God had told Joseph. And there's plenty, and they store up food. And when the 7 years of brutal famine came, a time when families, kids could have been starving to death, it would have been tremendous tragedy in that country, Joseph is able to bless Egypt because there's plenty of food for everyone. And I want you to see what's actually transpiring here. Here's what's transpiring. In Genesis 41, 56 and 57, it says this. It says, when the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened up the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. Now get this next part. It wasn't just in that country. His blessing expands. It says, and the whole world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. Not only does he bless Egypt, but they stored up enough to share with the rest of the known world. And please grab a hold of this. In so doing, Joseph fulfills God's mission. That I'm going to bless you, you're going to be a blessing, and what? And all the people of the earth are going to be blessed through you, Joseph. Surely there had to be a moment where Joseph began to look back and think, going, wow, being a slave, as hard as that was, being in prison, as torturous as that was, being rejected by your family, as disappointing as that was, no matter how bad, I now understand why. It all makes sense. You see, if you have a why to live, you can bear almost any how. A favorite book of mine is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's kind of the opposite of Choose Your Own Adventure. It's Frankl's story of surviving not 1, not 2, not 3, but really 4 Nazi death camps, including Auschwitz during the Holocaust. And it is a remarkable story. And according to Frankl, he said the prisoners who survived were the ones who recognized a meaning and a mission for their lives, and they looked forward to fulfilling it. Those people had a reason to live and a reason to overcome the ruthless abuse and horrendous living conditions in Nazi concentration camps. And in fact, as Frankl reflected on his experience and wrote this book, he was the first person I ever heard say, if you have a why to live, you can bear almost anyhow. That was true for Joseph, and I'm telling you, that's true for you. I don't know what it is that you're going through. I don't know what kind of disappointments you've had. I don't know what kind of heartaches you've had. I don't know where life has taken you. But I will promise you this. Someday, it's going to make sense. Someday, maybe in this life or maybe in the next life. See, we have a why. We are blessed to be a blessing. And as God's people, that's our mission on earth. No matter where we are, no matter where life takes us, no matter how it turns out, that is why we are here. Now, if I wanted to, I could go back and I could show you how Joseph used each of those blessed practices. I could show you how B began with prayer. Whether a slave, prisoner, or king, he was constantly talking and hearing from God. I could talk to you about how L, he listened. He listened to the needs of those around him, his slave masters, fellow inmates, even the Pharaoh. I could talk to you how E, he would eat. He ate with the whole country. Really, he ate with the whole world, right? The first S, serve, how he served. Whether it was the one who owned him, kept watch after him, or ruled over him, Joseph served. And story? Well, I can't really go there, but in the next couple of weeks, we're going to tell you how Joseph's story ends. And I'd tell you now, but it'd steal all the thunder of your campus pastor. It is a great ending to an amazing story. The blessed strategy. I want you to get this. It's not just something from back in Bible times. It's something for all times, our time. It's part of our identity as missionaries. It's our why, our compelling cause. It brings meaning to our lives. And it's also something that's happening right here in Edgewater.
I'm with Dori Gorman. Dori and her husband Rich are the campus pastors here at Community Edgewater. And I've had the privilege of working alongside them for the past 2 years since they moved to this community. And I can tell you, they have really embraced their identity as missionaries. And Dori, I just love to ask you, I know this whole notion of being a missionary has taken on special meaning for you, but tell us a little bit more how that has hit you personally.
Yeah, it's great when you get to be a part of something that you're like, only God could do this. There's no way this could happen apart from God. And that's what for us, as we moved into this neighborhood, as we moved into Chicago to be missionaries here, I feel like we've got to see some of these stories unfold. And for me, it really began a couple years ago. Actually, we had just moved to Chicago and we had driven back to the Yellow Box to be a part of one of the celebration services. And at this particular service, Dave really challenged everyone to take serious the B of begin with prayer, to begin praying for someone in your life that you could help find their way back to God. And I remember the service ended with like a stack of baptism t-shirts up at the front. You could come forward and take a baptism shirt and treat that as your reminder to pray and to pray for someone who's finding their way back to God. And so I took that shirt and I remember driving back into the city and hanging it up on our wall and really praying, who would be the first person at our campus that I might have the opportunity to baptize. And so we just started with that prayer, and probably, 6-7 months later, we were at another thing with community. We're at an all-campus leadership community, and heard a similar kind of challenge, but this time it was, instead of the focus being on begin with prayer, the focus was really on listening and eating. And what that looked like was we all received some barbecue sauce and some matches, and it really had a challenge over the summer. Just have a cookout and use that as an opportunity to listen to your neighbors, to get to know them, and to eat. And our campus has these things, chill and grills. They're sort of these cookouts, these barbecues that we have. And so we've been doing that, but something this time for me really began to go, okay, I really do want to just listen. And maybe, someone that we invite or someone that comes, maybe there'd be an opportunity to get to know them a little bit more. So we did just that.
So I remember both of those challenges too. And if I have it right, you began by really asking God to, and praying and saying, Lord, I'd love to have the opportunity, if possible, to have the privilege of baptizing somebody. Yeah. And then when you and Rich started hosting these chill and grills, these cookouts at your house, you I ask God also to help you listen more intently to Him and to the people that might be coming to these cookouts to help you maybe connect with somebody in particular. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
exactly right.
I'm kind of beginning to see a pattern here. All right, so what happened next?
Yeah, so the first chilling girl we had after that challenge to really listen, I met Courtney. And I had known of Courtney and I'd seen her. Her roommate Josh is a part of our campus, is a part of Edgewater. And so I knew of her, but she came for the first time to this cookout that we had at our house. And I could tell, she really liked it, but was sort of surprised that she liked it because, maybe the Christians she had met before were sort of weird or whatever, and we were just normal enough. I'm sure we have our own
It's always good when
oddities.
you're normal enough.
Yeah,
That's
normal
important.
enough that's surprised her, and we just sort of began to get to know each other, and her and I started a friendship, and then she started actually coming on Sundays to celebrate with us at Edgewater, and it was great. Some of the steps she began to take is she actually began to serve. She was a part of Kids City and also our arts team. And so every Sunday, we're serving together. And that was a great step for us. And then also, Courtney and I just began to spend time together and began to hear more of her story and her hear more of my story. And yeah, I'll never forget December 16th. It was the day that she really decided I'm ready to really take this next step and be baptized. But I could tell you more about it, but it'd be better to really just hear it from Courtney.
My name is Courtney West, and I've been going to Community Christian Edgewater for about 3 months now. I found the church through my roommate, Joshua. He found Community Edgewater online when we first moved to Chicago in September last year. So I was hanging out with, some of the people from the church, but I didn't start going until this September. It was a very rough summer for me. I was at a very, very stressful job in New York. I had a lot going on just in my personal life and then at work. So when I came back to Chicago, I was just needing some relief from all that. We would do a chill and grill every other Friday night, and it was so much fun, like hanging out with all these people and just starting to talk with them. And I met Rich and Dori, who are the pastors at Community Edgewater. I just loved them so much, and I realized that they think so much like I do, because I had a lot of bad experiences with some churches in my past, and it was so nice to meet someone who had a lot of the same views that I had. So I was like, I've got to go to this church. I'm one of those Christians who think, oh, well, I don't have to go to church. As long as I'm praying and I read my Bible and I try and do good things, I don't really need to go to church. I didn't realize how much I was really missing it until I went back. And I was like, wow, this is really feeding my soul. And I need to be here now. And I haven't missed a Sunday since, and I don't plan on missing one. A lot of the people who go are very laid back. I mean, we all have really busy lives, but we all find time to come together and just hang out, which I really love. I love not only being a part of a church, but being a part of a church that hangs out outside of church. It's nice to have that sense of community. I mean, it's right there in the title. I actually have not been baptized. My family, growing up, they were always like, we want you to make that decision. So as I got a little older and we started not attending church, baptism just didn't happen. They haven't talked about baptism at Community Edgewater yet. Hey, I'd be willing to do it though. Sign me up. I've found my people. I found this family who is helping me strengthen my relationship with God.
Our mission as the people of God is to bless the world. And here's how we're going to do it. Just like you saw, one person at a time. And I want you to know something. I'm not just teaching this. I'm trying to live this out with you. This is the why of my life. About 3 months ago, a friend of mine who's far from God, sat across the table from me with tremendous vulnerability, just looks me in the eye and says, "Can you help me believe in God?" Ever since then, on a daily basis, I begin with prayer for her. On a weekly basis, we meet at Starbucks, and we talk, and I listen and hear her story. And we eat, even though it's maybe a cup of coffee or a latte, we do. And I'm discovering ways through that friendship of how I can serve her. And I fully believe the time will come when I'll get a chance to, that last S story, tell my story of finding my way back to God, and hopefully help her find her way back to God. So here's my challenge for every one of us at Community. 2 things. Number 1, like Dori, like I'm trying to do, I want you to pick one person that you'll pray for. Begin with prayer, that you want to bless. Who is that for you, that person that you'll begin to pray for? I want you to get a name, okay? Get a name. Even bring their face to mind. You got it? And I want you to pray for them every day, asking God, say, God, allow me to bless them in some way. And then as you begin to do that, here's the second challenge. I want you to think about how you can use those 5 missional practices to bless them on a regular basis. To pray for them, to listen to them, to hear their story, to eat with them, share meals with them, build a friendship with them. Then discover how you can serve them and love them the way they want to be loved. And in time, share your story about how you found your way back to God. You see, we are blessed. Why? To receive that blessing so we can bless others and bless the world.